You're no artist. You obviously don't have the talent or any form of creativity. You suck!
Welcome back to the Unreal Podcast. My name is Miles McNaughton, and I'm only wearing a tie. Today, we're reviewing some things from the Writing General. We've got a Sussy SNEEDPOST from Spencer, and we have Phantom Tollbooth version 4 with note from Ari. Co-host today is Rhyme.
Hey, how you guys doing? I'm on this show for the first time. You may have noticed because the intro was something very loud and obnoxious that probably made you feel a little uncomfortable.
Nevertheless, the guy shouting, "You suck," never fails to get me to laugh. All right, so we've got the post up. I'll go ahead and start reading. This one's pretty long. We may not get through it all, but let's just hop into it. Sussy Sneed went to a walk to Seed Park to see what he may feed. And there at Seed Park, what he found near a tree, of those with many spokes and reeds, by the base of its trunk, a truffle hog sniffing for truffles. And Sussy Sneed thought this truffle hog may enjoy the seeds he had to feed. So Sussy Sneed walked to the truffle hog, who was frustrated as truffles escaped him, and was startled when Sussy Sneed touched its coarse hog hair that grew thicker at its nape. Yet Sussy Sneed told Truffle Hog to not be afraid, as he had only come to touch the thick hair of his nape to ask if he would like to be fed by the seeds Sussy Sneed brought here to the Seed Park, and the Truffle Hog, still frustrated that truffles escaped him, agreed to be fed by the seeds Sussy Sneed offered. Okay, this is like a tongue twister on steroids. This is really fucking hard to read. While Sussy Sneed fed Truffle Hogs his seeds, Truffle Hog's ears perched up like a truffle dog's, and he snorted like a wild hog and jumped high like a wild horse, because he had smelled it by the hill, through the high grass of the green hill, the lovely lady named Sally Reed was walking, and with her smooth voice shouting coarsely Truffle Hog's name, because he was not a wild hog, as Sally Reed was his owner. Truffle Hog squealed loudly back to Sally Reed in the loud language of hog squeals and shouts. Loud enough, Sussy Sneed covered his cold ears with his hands, covered by the warm drool Truffle Hog left on them when he licked the seeds Sussy Sneed offered. And Truffle Hog squealed loud enough for Sally Reed to hear him even through the high grass of the green hill? I'm sorry to stop again, but I just have to already comment and give commendation to Spencer for making me want to kill myself in just 2 paragraphs. This is actually impressive.
You're going to need to take a breather after every paragraph because the man hates full stops. Take a deep breath.
This is so retarded. Okay, all right. I'll try to get through a couple more. Parting the high grass with her beautifully colored hands and walking stately, with a bright smile, Sally Reed called to Truffle Hog when she laid her eyes on him. Sally Reed sang thus: "Come here, come here, come here, Piggy, Piggy Sneed." And Truffle Hog ran squealing to Sally Reed, and Sussy Sneed walked behind Piggy Sneed the Truffle Hog towards Sally Reed, not to follow Piggy Sneed, but to come closer to Sally Reed, that smiled so brightly. Should have been who. And brightly did she smile, that Sally Reed, dimpled cheeks and dimpled fingers, and calves like a cow, such was Sally Reed. She was such because her father was a palm tree, and Sussy Sneed to speak and say something then said this: "Is this your Truffle Hog's name, Piggy Sneed, Sally Reed?" He knew of her beforehand, as everyone spoke about her. "Well, let me tell you, my name is Sussy Sneed, and I am glad to meet you," said Sussy Sneed. When Sussy Sneed stopped talking, hardly could Sally Reed contain her laughing, and she laughed hardly. She moved her mouth as if eating the air. She let a sound like Truffle Hog squealed. Thus she did Sally Reed when she heard Sussy Sneed's name. She then said, "My father, who is a palm tree, speaks much about you." Sussy Sneed blushed to think Sally Reed knew of him by her father, in his head floating and crashing ideas as to what he might have said about him, wondering if Sally Reed had a beautiful image of him in her, or would her father hate him, for reasons he did not now should be know. But Sally Reed kept laughing. "And father say about me," let's see, sorry, I skipped a line. And Sally Reed kept laughing, but he felt like laughing did her, and so he did. He laughed with her, and while laughing he asked this: "And what does your father say about me, Sally Reed?" Sussy Sneed asked her, and she did not give a clear answer. Not because she spoke dimly, but because when she talked she smiled, and her smile was beautiful, because her father was a palm tree. And the Sally Reed said to Sussy Sneed, "Would you like to come to my house and meet my father, Sussy Sneed?" And he agreed. and Sussy Sneed followed Sally Reed to her house, and Piggy Sneed, the truffle hog, followed them both as well. I kind of just want to skim the rest because this is really tiring me out.
Honestly, man, we might need to tag team this beast. Take turns.
Okay. Well, if you want to pick it up, it's at Sally Reed Walked.
Oh my God, it's only that far. Okay. Sally Reed walked, and you could smell the way she walked. Sally Reed placed her feet on the ground, planted firmly. Sally Reed touched the bark of every tree they passed next to, and Piggy Sneed sniffed for truffles all along the way. But all escaped him, and Sussy Sneed, walking behind her, placed her eyes on her while she walked, and smelled the way she walked. Such was Sally Reed, because her father was a palm tree. They went through the den and through the dark. They penetrated the ghoulish shadows and oldest trees casted on the black ground of the gloomiest of corners in Seed Park. There, where never had Sussy Sneed went before, not even to feed the animals. He felt scared, but trusted that Sally Reed could not live there, where no one could live, and he kept following her until they came to a place where a donkey, or it could have been a mule, was tied with a thick rope to the thick trunk of an old tree. Sussy Sneed, mount the donkey, as it is the only way to reach my house, said Sally Reed. And once you've mounted the mule, I will as well. And Piggy Sneed will follow us on foot, as he is a truffle hog, and he can go where animals can go. Sally Reed took Sussy Sneed on the mule, or the donkey, through the veil of watery shadows to beyond them, on an island with no water around it, where the sun never sets, and where her house was. The donkey or the mule swayed its head as it walked, nor did its hooves clack on the stony ground, and it did bite the air, and its teeth made the sound of hooves clacking on stony ground. It bit the air because it was hungry. The hunger made it walk. Piggy Sneed, the truffle hog, followed them quietly. The donkey or the mule followed small dot in the distance that was a single patch of tall grass extending its leaves like arms in adoration to the sun that never sets. And before the mule or donkey reached the patch of tall grass, Sally Reed told Sussy Sneed to tell the donkey or the mule to stop so they may dismount it. And Sally Reed said, and here we must wait now. And on the stony ground she made 2 thrones of stone where she invited to sit Sussy Sneed, and he did. And Truffle Hog sat and slept on Sally Reed's legs while she sat, and while Sussy Sneed and Sally Reed sat, they waited. Thank you for that. The donkey or the mule ate the tall grass, which had seeds on its leaves, but it lived because its heart was buried on the ground. The mule or the donkey ate all it could eat from the patch of grass, and in time it manured around it and over it. Oh, lovely. And such did it plant more grass, they grew slowly, watered by the mule or the donkey's sweat, but not because the sun was hot, as the sun here is always pleasant and empty always, but it sweated because it was hungry, as a donkey or mule always hungered and was never satisfied. The grass grew slowly, and it was eaten quickly, then swiftly manured afterwards. The eater traced a circle around the center, which was the original patch of grass, creating new life constantly. Then it reached a point where so much new grass was made that the mule did not eat it in time, but it kept planting more and more, and the grass grew tall and thick, and the mule or the donkey was always hungry. Sally Reed told Sussy Sneed to follow her into the tall grass, because that is where her house was built with colored mosaics and without wings, and it was stony like the ground that is covered by dirt and dead grass and spilled seeds. The house was not tall, yet it had a tall door, and the tall door led to a kitchen, and the kitchen had a stony table, and it was not tall, and it had fruits of many kinds, all big, all grapes, all colorful, all juicy. Yet Sally Reed, still holding Piggy Sneed, told Sussy Sneed not to touch any of the food on the table, because it was not for him. Yet from the table she took a truffle and fed it to Piggy Sneed. Behind the stony table there was a window taller than the house, a window made of no glass and no window frames. The window led to the garden from where the juicy and tasty fruits were harvested, and Sally Reed told Sussy Sneed this. Sussy Sneed, follow me into the garden of smelly flowers and tasty fruits, but make sure not to eat anything from it, because it is not for you. Sussy Sneed followed. The plants in the garden covered the sky, but not the sun, and all the juicy fruits and tasty appeared to be made of translucent stones. The trunks of the trees were thinner at their base, and next to a market rock, Sally Reed said, "Pay attention well and do what I have done." Then she hopped 3 times and 2 times more, switched foot, slid her fingers into the space that opened and entered. Sussy Sneed did the same, but Piggy Sneed was left behind because hogs do not have fingers. And there in that space they entered stood proud and solid Sally Reed's father, that was a palm tree.
Sally Reed greeted her father, and Sussy Sneed greeted Sally Reed's father, the palm tree. The palm tree greeted them back and said this, Sussy Sneed, I have spoken much about you to Sally Reed, and I am glad to have been able to meet you and that you met my daughter. My name is Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. You must have wondered what I told her when she told you that I told her about you. And I will let you know, Sussy Sneed, that what I've told Sally Reed about you is neither good nor bad. I have known about you for much time, since I was told by a bird that appeared to rest on my branch, that you were born from your mother, which I have never met, but I do not know your father, that you never met. I know your father because he was a skeleton hanged on a branch and had a tongue to speak and 2 eyes to see. The bird told me that your mother was allured by your father's words, and when she tried to unhang him, he, instead of desiring to be unhung, desired instead for his tongue to live on its own. So he spat onto your mother's hand his tongue when she extended them to hang him, and through her ungloved hands she was pregnant, and that's how you were conceived. So said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. He continued. I'm sorry, I'm keeping it together. If I would have my daughter Sally Reed married, it would be to a man like you, son of the skeleton tree. Yet what the bird told me is unsettling. He told me he very many times had seen you, Sussy Sneed, both eating from nutritious and juicy fruits, and from smelly and salty vegetables, and from the savory and well-made meat of the strongest animals there are. This must not be so, Sussy Sneed, as you are a man's son, both of a skeleton tree and a woman. Could you enjoy all? But if you want to marry my daughter, Sally Reed, either must you reject the savory and well-made meat of the strongest animals there are, and reject your skull. And I know that you desire to marry her, as I can see how close to her standing you are, and how you smell, said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. Sussy Sneed then said this, Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree, at least let me say this before I am forced to deny that which I eat. That one Piggy Sneed, I found him looking for truffles to eat when I ran into him at Seed Park, and then I fed him seeds and he ate seeds. Is it that bad for me to eat both of the tasty fruit and the well-made meat, if Piggy Sneed can both enjoy the hidden truffle and the fed seed? Said Sussy Sneed. Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree ignited in a scorching blue fire, but his voice remained the same as he spoke this. Sussy Sneed, only because I knew your father will I tolerate a man accusing my daughter of wrongdoing, even if you accuse her pet Piggy Sneed. And you must know that Piggy Sneed eats what is for him as his food is truffles, because he is a hog of truffles. Yet he must not have eaten the seeds you offered, said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree, while his flames diminished their intensity, and he thought in silence. Then from his leaves a coconut fell, which hit the ground with a hollow sound, and the coconut held inside Piggy Sneed. Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree asked Piggy Sneed if he had eaten from the seeds Sussy Sneed offered, and with great shame did Piggy Sneed admit he did. I'll read a couple more lines. Disappointed, even if Piggy Sneed partakes in this, it should not mean that I will tolerate what I do in an animal on you, Sussy Sneed, said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. So tell me, if you are willing to leave behind your diet of meat to join me and my daughter in the vegetable hidden garden we enjoy, and if not, feel free to leave. But Sussy Sneed had other thoughts in mind. And what if you two follow me? Said he. And how do you pretend we do? Said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. "We will eat Piggy Sneed," then said Sussy Sneed, to the laughter of both Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree and Sally Reed his daughter. "Sussy Sneed, even if we eat Piggy Sneed, their blood and their meat would not allow us to join you, but barely just be and eat of the hog meat," said Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree. "And what if you eat part of me?" replied Sussy Sneed, and Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree answered, "If you are willing, so it may be."
And at this answer, Sussy Sneed made a cleaver from the stony ground, sharpened it with a whetstone, and the cleaver was heavy like a millstone. But having eaten the savory and well-made meat from the strongest animals, Sussy Sneed could wield his cleaver easily. He set up a flat stone so he could chop comfortably, and decided to give his left arm to Sally Reed to eat, and his right leg for Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree to eat. With one quick slice his arm was chopped off, but Sussy Sneed did not grimace nor shout, and Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree cauterized his wound with the scorching blue fire. And he did the same with his leg, and with the same scorching blue fire they prepared the meat, and they used the juicy and tasty fruit to accompany it, and the smelly flowers to season it. Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree and Sally Reed his daughter ate the meat, and they were pleased at its soft texture. And it was juicy like a fruit, and it was sweet like a fruit as well. Once they had eaten of him, Great Tall Reed the Palm Tree told Sussy Sneed to eat of his fruits, and so he did, and the fruits were savory and well made. With a thick branch and vines, Sussy Sneed made a new leg for himself, but remained armless, and he married Sally Reed with her father's blessing, but transubstantiated, that is, changed, Sally Reed took it upon herself to rename herself Sussy Reed. So Susie Reed and Sussy Sneed gave their farewells to Great Big Heart the Palm Tree, and returned to the outside of Susie Reed's house, where the donkey or the mule had almost completely eaten all grass, and they used of the scorching blue fire to consume it all, so that the mule or donkey hungered again, and once mounted on it, they returned towards the watery shadows, to the darkness of the thick trees, to the outskirts of the seed park itself, to the tall tree with spokes and wheels, where Sussy Sneed had found Piggy Sneed, and there they killed Piggy Sneed and made a feast of his meat and body. After doing such, they opened a hole in the ground and buried Piggy Sneed's bones in that hole, and along with the bones they planted a palm tree seed to signify that from here on out will all the great and tall palm trees of the earth have a great big pumping heart full of blood, and its roots are veins, and all the palm trees in the earth will be Great Big Heart the Palm Tree, Susie Reed Sneed's father, and so it was. Sussy Sneed Reed and Susie Reed Sneed made a great house with bones and wood, and it was stony, and they lived there for very long. Sussy Sneed Reed lived from chopping down trees and selling their dead wood. Susie Reed Sneed made money chopping animals' bodies and selling their dead meat. Their marriage was long, and since Susie Reed Sneed's father was a palm tree, she bore many children of Sussy Sneed Reed, and they both were very fruitful and multiplied. The end.
Thank God. Very clearly, it's a shitpost, right? It's not literature, quote unquote, but for an entertainment value, I think it was very entertaining. Several times I had a good laugh. When he started talking about at the end of a big pumping heart full of blood replacing all the palm trees, I was like, that could be a problem for a lot of reasons.
If you imagine it as structured like a fairy tale, then it still is sort of annoying. At some point, the rhyme went from being cute to being, oh, this is a 3,000th word you've rhymed in this story. It just, It sort of drowns you.
Yeah, the novelty wore off probably about maybe the second or third paragraph.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you get the first initial of like rhyming seed, sneed, reed, and then when the continuity just continues to sort of get that redundancy, it does lose its charm. So yeah, in that respect, I think, in terms of improvement, I mean, there's not much of an improvement suggestion you could really make besides try to rhyme with different words. But when you have characters that repeat so often, and then you're using their names, you're rhyming the same couple of words together, it becomes like I said earlier, about a 3,000 word tongue twister. And yeah, it has novelty, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah, I'd have to ask the writer what his inspiration was for the piece, whether he's aping something specific, because then we can know whether he failed to replicate it. I got a mix of, let's say, myth, because obviously the reference, don't eat any of this, is not for you, is whatever, Persephone, the Greek, whatever. And the way it's told is resembling a children's story. So I'm thinking, okay, this is some sort of myth told in the cadence and the style of maybe a picture book. But there's just, it's a lot of repeating the exact same point and joke for paragraphs and paragraphs. And the new information, or rather in this context, the new interesting things being done are sort of crammed in like one paragraph. So when they go to the palm tree, which by the way, we really belabor the points with great tall read, the palm tree. It's very unpleasant to read for the 50th time. But there are some things done in the last part of the story that are interesting, particularly with the description of Sussy Sneed chopping off his own arm. But the thing is, the interesting things that are done in conjunction with the conceit of the story, which is the rhyming and the rhythm and the alliteration, it's done very sparingly. It's just not. This doesn't justify 3,000 words, man.
I agree with that. I actually got a lot of biblical references out of it as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's very clear at the end is fruitful and multiplied. I'm pretty sure that's straight out of Genesis.
That was a reach. That pulled me out a little bit. I was like, okay, guy, I know you you don't have to fucking wink at it.
Yeah. It not quite breaks the fourth wall, but it's kind of like the little nudge that's just a little too hard on the train. You guys like, hey, you see this? See what I'm doing here? Yeah. Entertaining. That's about as much as I can say for it, I suppose.
Now, when I selected the story, I selected it specifically because I thought, hey, even if it doesn't make any fucking sense, because that sometimes happens with this guy's story, it'll at least be fun to read. I was not expecting the tongue twisters. I expected, like, repetition, rhyme, rhythm, like an unbroken poem, but I did not expect this to be so unpleasant to read aloud.
It was, it's definitely a failing of consonants, but in some respects, I think that's what consonants is super, super good for. And there's a lot of enjoyment you can get out of that, because there's a lot of focus in prose about making things sound pretty and musical. You go for the softer alliterations, the softer sounds. But when you have a really good consonants alliteration, even if it is repeated, I think it's intended to sound and read unpleasant, which it'd be really unfortunate if this was intended to be read and not sound unpleasant and difficult to read. So I like the fact that he continued to reuse consonant sounds and to go to sort of avoid alliteration using softer sounds. I think it's an underutilized tool in general for a lot of writers, because especially when you're coming out of Lit and out of 4chan, the focus really is on the beauty of your language, the beauty of your words, and how they interconnect with each other. The focus is on the prose. But people seem to forget there's more to the prose than just like cellar door or squirming waves. Using consonants is underutilized.
That probably comes from the lack of poetry study in modern writers.
Yes.
Whereas a guy from 70 years ago is going to be like, he's going to write almost as much poetry. He's not going to release it, but he's going to write almost as much poetry as prose.
Correct. And I think a healthy balance of the two. Obviously, you really should pick one, in my opinion, that you want to specialize in and focus on that. But being able to double dip into both, only advances your skill set as a writer and as an author. Well, if you don't have any other comments on that one, we can roll right into Phantom Tollbooth by Ari. He's a regular contributor to I think it was the AMP magazine. Is that right?
Yeah, he's currently putting together the AMP Best of release. So
very nice. Okay, well, I'll just get right into reading this then. All right, Phantom Tollbooth by Ari, version 4 with note. We just kept driving, and the sand keeps whipping by. It's been a few hours, and while the mountains behind us look ever more distant, nothing appears on the horizon. Eventually the dog, Henry, speaks up. You're not going to turn around? No. Would you let me out if I asked? Well, sure. And we sit speechless again, rumbling on down our golden highway. Henry joined me at the very start, just when everyone was packing or boarding up, watching the impending dust storm roll in. I was half-cocked and tipsy, sitting in a bar half-closed, when he asked if he could get a ride with me. He didn't say where he meant to go, so I figured it didn't matter. There'd be nowhere to stay once the storm rolled in, but you can outrun it most of the time. Josh, the bug with the big mustache, Blue, was on the roadside a little ways out of town. After a while, the roads narrowed down to about a car's width, putting you precariously close to the edge. They're all one way, so at least you know nobody is coming up on your front. But there's a special monotony to driving for hours, just a few inches from a plummet to your death. Anyway, with that impending taper, Josh was either going to hold someone up, or get run off. Whichever it was going to be, and with the way he was hanging his head, dragging his sorry feet behind him, I couldn't stand the thought of letting him miserably trudge on until then, so I pulled over. You want in? Oh, please, yes, thanks so much. The ride had been pretty quiet with just me and Henry until Josh got in. Seemed the guy thought the silence was awkward. He told us something about how his own car was out of commission, and that he had to leave it behind a few stops back. Asked him how he got by just walking. Well, normally somebody comes and helps me out. There's always someone nice who drives by eventually. So that's how it worked. All he had to do was wait for some sucker like me to stop, and so far one always did. With the storm rolling in, the folks with homes can't prepare the food to keep another mouth for a week. So anyone driving by knows this poor sap's going to get swept up and blown off into the desert if they don't do something. Seemed incredible he could bet on pity with such perfect odds. You must be a lucky guy. Crickets are always lucky. Yeah, of course he was a cricket. I heard they're the ones that ate up all the grass and trees and plants and turned this place into a desert. Or maybe it was locusts? I don't think they're much different anyway. Just cold-blooded open mouths that want to take whatever you've got. They'd gobble up the whole world if they had room in their stomachs. Josh, do you need to get off somewhere? Oh, no, I'm fine going wherever you're going. Did that mean he'd just keep tagging along? He seemed the type to cry if I told him to fuck off and find someone else to drive him. I guess it doesn't cost much to drag another body, but I really just didn't want to keep the company of a bug. I could see Henry lolling his head back and forth between me and Josh. He knew what I was thinking. Probably wondered if eventually I'd tell him to fuck off too. Except I didn't mind Henry. It's been a while since dogs were man's best friend, but at least they don't leech like bugs do. Henry went back to staring ahead. We'd put some distance between us and the storm, when finally we saw a blip on the horizon. Getting closer, I could see it was just a little shack attached to the road, and closer yet, I could see there was a gate in our way. What the hell? Shit, I bet it's a toll booth, Henry said. A what? Toll booth. I heard someone at the bar say they pop up now and then. They say you've got to pay to get by, I don't know what for. I grimaced. That's a load of shit. Yeah, I guess it is. I got a little cash on me. I'm next to broke. Will they really lock us out? I don't know. Josh didn't say a word. The storm seemed far off, but it was only moving a little slower than we were. If we stopped too long, we'd be done for. I could see Henry looking back, squinting at the storm, way past Josh. I turned around to gauge the distance, and Josh was looking hard to the side, Still silence as the topic of money came up. Asshole. We finally rolled up to the gate in the booth. Some guy walked up to my door. The toll was $20 per person, sir. I had 50-something on me. No way, what the fuck for? Maintenance, sir. I shot around to Henry. Before he spoke, I could plead. But he spoke before I could plead with him. I've got enough for both of us. Don't worry. I will make you pay. Josh finally spoke. What about me? What about you? Henry was glaring back at Josh. And when I turned around, that stupid bug was shaking. The wind was whipping up, and I could see the wall of dust swallowing up the road. I couldn't kick him out. I've got no money. I can't. I'll die. So what? Henry, I said. I could hear him growling faintly. I've got some money. I'm not going to toss the bug out now. Josh started in his seat when I said bug, this mean look flashing on his face for an instant, but he caught himself before it cost him his ride. Henry and I shelled out and the gate opened up. Have a safe trip. The shack, the gate, the attendant, they all shimmered and then vanished. Another few hours went by. The storm didn't look so deadly from afar, but I knew we were still a ways out from a town with a bunker. On the horizon was yet another blip, same as before. You're fucking with me, Henry. Is that one of those booths? He narrowed his eyes. Shit, man, I think it is. We made it up to the thing and it looked like the exact same guy as last time. He walked up. The toll is $20 per person, sir. Fuck off. We already paid. This is a new toll, sir. The way we split things last time left me with 20 flat. Henry looked at me. Matt. He sounded serious. I've only got 30 left. I didn't want to turn to face Josh. I could tell Henry didn't care, but I still felt guilty. It felt like a long minute passed before Josh spoke up. What are we going to do? I still hadn't turned. Josh, get out. What? Get out. Josh went nuts, but to my surprise, he never cried. Maybe it's that bugs can't cry. He said he'd die, screamed out prejudice, and wailed something about brotherhood and sticking together. Finally, Henry barked, get out of the fucking car, Josh. And Josh just stepped out. He hesitated, but he got out. Henry and I got our money together and paid. The gate lifted. Josh stood timidly behind the attendant. Wait. Only Henry turned to look at him. What if I pay for myself? You have money? Not much, barely any. If I pay, I won't be able to eat. But I don't want to die, and I won't make it if I walk. And you prick, you've had money all along? Then I looked. Henry and I split the fare in half last time, so we both caught part of Josh's bill. I could see Josh's hands reaching way inside his jacket, fishing through all those hidden pockets. He asked the attendant, can you make change? Henry sprung from his side of the car and had a hold on Josh before I could even clench a fist. But I got out too, and while Henry held him, I started wailing on his face. It hurt my skin pounding on Chitin. But I started getting him good in the eyes, and meanwhile Henry had Josh's antenna clamped between his teeth. When Josh screamed, I could see inside his mouth. Just this horrible maw hidden under his mustache, full of little pincers and fuzz. His scream sounded tinny up close. All 6 of Josh's limbs thrashed and scratched, but he was weak. Before long, he was just balling up under blows. The attendant watched. Josh wasn't anywhere near dead, but he was starting to go limp. Henry went into Josh's jacket and got more than 80 off him. The Josh leaked something nasty on about half the bills. When my turn came, I found another 60 in a pocket with a false bottom. That stupid bug could have paid for all of us both times. I gave him one last kick in the side before Henry and I left him there. I started the car. The attendant unperturbed waved us off. Have a safe trip. The dust clouds were twice as close as when we had stopped. And then there's a note right at the end. Note. I used to live in a basement infested with crickets. They started out these little things that I felt bad squishing, but my pity let them multiply, and after a few months they were these springy Goliaths rustling around in the dark. I'd hear them crawling around in empty bags when I put out the light, and they were a bitch to catch. Now I hate crickets. Not bad, not bad. What's your thoughts, Ron?
I gotta say, this is not my favorite kind of writing. I can immediately, I'll say it's competent, especially when you're reading it. He's got his grammar's all tight. He knows how to write. Let's say. You want me to go on? Okay, so
yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
This doesn't need to be a written story. And obviously the excessive amount of dialogue, and the fact that dialogue goes on unbroken with description or anything for 6, sometimes 7 lines, points to that. But more importantly, if you read the description here, I think, just off the top of my head, there was one descriptor that was not purely visual, and it was his scream sounded tinny up close, which is unfortunately kind of cliche, but still, it's a sound descriptor. But everything else is just straight dialogue couched in scene building style description. This is a script, essentially. And as a script, it's cool. Imagine it like being a short film or something. It's cool. It's just not really. To me, it's just, I don't know. I don't like that kind of horror.
I didn't see it as horror. I saw it more as just like a empty fiction. Doesn't sound quite right, but just as like a plain fiction piece. I don't remember exactly what you would classify Phantom Tollbooth as in terms of a genre. I thought similarly like you that it was a lot of dialogue wrapped in scene setting, but it was clear enough for me, since I'm familiar with the Phantom Tollbooth, to understand sort of the shape of the scenes and the characters. I will say, perhaps I'm a little less critical than you, because when I came into this, I did not think about setting this piece up as sort of literary. I could tell pretty much from the get-go that it was a little bit more of like a play, as opposed to here's a piece that I want to evoke an emotion or pull something out from like the ether of humanity.
It's not so much whether the piece is literary. It's just, are you using the medium? Like, are you doing something that only literature can do? And that's it's a question. It's a big question, capital Q. But it's not. You don't need to answer that, but you need to say, well, a movie cannot make you feel anything. But like purely visual, static visual descriptions are something that film does better. And if you're not really using the fact that you've got this evocative medium where you can basically force your reader to experience a waking dream, and you're instead just making them read a screenplay, I think it's really pervasive, this kind of writing, and I don't love it. I don't like it.
I can respect that. I think it's a trap that a lot of people will fall into. I'm definitely guilty of it myself, where you have such a clear idea of the scene that you want to build, and so you build it and you think, wow, this is great. It's exactly how I imagined it. But there in that crux sort of also lies the problem, is that there's no, not that there's no commentary, because maybe there is, but it's exactly how you imagined it. It's all visual. I don't think this story in general, like how it's designed and set up, and just the storyline itself, lends it well to like literature as a medium. Sure, maybe you could get some kind of commentary out from I think the main character's name was Jeff or something. He's mentioned somewhere in here. Matt. I think it'd be difficult to turn this story into something that uses the medium well.
Okay, so let's not make it so much like, I don't want people to think, oh, I need some sort of emotional resonance in a story. I don't. But let's compare it to Piggy Sneed, which, while exhausting, tried to do things that you can only specifically do in this written medium. You cannot play with alliteration and consonants, whatever, in film or in comics. I mean, in comics, yeah, because it's written. But unlike TV, this is something that is exclusive to literature. This is, and it's not, okay, so it's not, say, my first draft is kind of script-like. It's dialogue with the occasional scene-setting description. My second draft needs to be beefed up with description. That's not what I'm saying. It's not a refinement issue. It's a more like from the bottom up, how are you building a scene? How are you building a written piece? Because if you're writing from reading literature, it really shouldn't resemble, on the first pass, a screenplay. Because you're not writing with the screenplay as inspiration. or maybe you shouldn't be. And that's obviously an opinion. That's not. I'm not gonna say it's a must. But if you're writing from literature as an inspiration, it shouldn't really resemble something that's not literature, to me.
I respect that. Like I said, I think it's very common nowadays for writers in general to it's just it's the contemporary style, right? Is to go after, because that's where maybe this is more of a commentary that's on a tangent outside the realm of this, but that's sort of where the money is, right? You write a book, you get the movie deal, and I don't think people particularly do that intentionally. Maybe they do as a contemporary writer, but it's easy to fall into that tempo, especially because instead of sitting down and reading an 80,000 word book, which might take you, I don't know, 5-6 hours, you could watch 2 or 3 movies.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the thing. The movie is better. If you're writing a movie down, the film is just better as a medium at doing that. We kind of have to, like, everyone's worried about, all anyone wants to do is fucking watch things now. They don't want to read. It's because you're kind of just giving them an inferior product. That's why, like, the only thing young men read, well, this is a generalization, but the really popular thing is, like, I don't know how to pronounce it, like Chinese web novel stuff. But that's just because there are no wuxia fucking TV shows on Netflix. As soon as there are, like, 20 of those things, you're going to see a lot fewer people on Royal Road every day because they get their fix somewhere else. Right.
And I think a lot of those wuxia people were really inspired by what I would consider prime examples, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, you think about what's his name, Will White. He really caught on the wave of Amazon and the wuxia genre as a whole. And if I remember correctly, 2012 was right about when Avatar: The Last Airbender stopped airing, or a couple of years afterwards.
We're looking for a fix. Will White guy, he's just perfect example of right place, right time. Good. Congratulations to him.
He saw the wave coming, and he already had his surfboard while everyone else was sitting on the beach.
Yeah, exactly. He's still kind of the only published wuxia that is competently written. He's still cornering that market. But anyway, we need to have a fucking wuxia episode at some point.
I've brainstormed a couple of wuxia stories. I just don't have the heart to write it. Yeah, you can't write something if your heart's not in it.
Exactly, and I fell for that same fucking trap. I wanted to so badly write a web novel, but like that shit is insanely boring. You have to write like 3,000 words a day. That's fucking crazy. I don't think I'm gonna do that.
In this respect, I really do envy James Craig, because he's able to just sit down and bust out 2,000 words, and he just throws up more or less his rough draft. My autism won't let me do that. I have to revise. I have to edit. I have to continually change and renew things. I just can't throw up a rough draft.
Yeah, he just cuts past any pretense and just writes what he's thinking. Which is, listen, no one else does that besides F. Gardner. But it's just those two who are capable of doing that. Everyone else's productivity is terrible.
Yeah, Craig has the I think he finally hit the realm of I've stopped giving a shit. From what I remember, we had a conversation about this, and he says, "Have you seen what passes for contemporary prose nowadays? Nobody reads anything contemporary for the prose. It doesn't matter. Just write out whatever you have. Put it as like a plot." I don't think he said this, but that's the impression I got. Is just write whatever you can, throw it out there, and just fill with quantity.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk to Craig for the show because he's got a new book coming out. But like, I feel like there's some nuance there. Even if we accept the premise that people don't read for the prose, there is still some tricks and some skill there to writing engaging workman-like prose that a lot of people miss. But anyway.
All right, well, thank you for listening. This has been the Unreal Press Podcast. I'm Miles McNaughton. My guest today was Rhyme and Grind. And until next time, as Ellie would say, cheers, everybody.
I may have gone too far in a few places.